All right, we've got part 4 of The Way of Kings. I read the whole thing yesterday evening into last night, and I did not know it was going to be that good. I haven't read all that much fiction, but this is one of those times where you're reading a book and you're like, wow, I didn't know a book could be this exciting to read. It's written so well. So what do we have going on right now? We've got Kaladin and Dalinar, largely the focus of this part of the book, and their character arcs are running in parallel in terms of their obsession with honor and doing the right thing. And indeed, we find out that Syl, she either rediscovers or at least just finally lets us know that she's not a wind sprint after all, as we assumed. She's something else. She's an honor sprint. She says that she binds things together. And like honor does with people, it binds them to their moral codes, to their friends and family. It binds them to something higher. So that is going on in parallel with Dalinar and Kaladin. And the interesting thing is that Dalinar is near the top of the social hierarchy. He's the uncle of the king, Bright Lord, the former king's brother. And then we've got Kaladin, who is not a Light Eyes, and in fact, he's a bridgeman, who in this context of the war is essentially the lowest of the low. And despite their social standing, they're both obsessed with being the best that they can be for their self, so that they can be the best that they can be for those around them. And finally, as I've been waiting for, their character arcs converge and they are interacting. Sadeas betrays Dalinar and betrays Adolin, and just when I was starting to trust Sadeas after he absolved Dalinar of this idea that he cut the leather strap on the king's saddle and tried to kill the king, he absolves Dalinar. That says no, it wasn't him. Dalinar starts to trust him as well, and indeed Sadeas still betrays him. I should have seen it coming. Sadeas is likely derivative, at least in some sense, from like sadist. So I should have seen it coming. Didn't exactly trust him, but I was starting to have some faith in him, and so was Dalinar, and that led to his demise. So he sacrifices him, and Dalinar, of course, survives, confronts Sadeas after the fact, and like a manipulative person would, Sadeas has all these justifications for what he's done. And you have to be wary of this in real life with people, because the manipulative people, they typically by the time you meet them in your life, they've had years and years of practice of manipulating others and coming up with these really nuanced justifications for what they're doing. You have to sometimes look at your situation, if you find yourself in a situation like this, from a third person's perspective and say, well, does that really seem right though? Because if you think about it, not only was Sadeas throwing away Dalinar's life, but also Adolin's life. Adolin doesn't have anything presumably going on with him. Sadeas just claims that he was doing Dalinar a favor because Dalinar is going mad, and this way he would be able to die with some honor and he wouldn't corrupt the king and all these things. But Adolin's not going mad, and then there's the 8,000 other troops that Sadeas was just throwing their lives away as well. So Kaladin saves Dalinar and Adolin and the remaining troops, and they could have ran off, but they didn't. Kaladin's obsessed with honor and doing the right thing, and so they save them. And he could have ran away after that, but Dalinar says, no, I'll make sure that Sadeas gives you to my camp and I'll take care of you. Kaladin's been burned in the past when he trusted Amaram, and he takes a risk, and this one last time he trusts Light Eyes and trusts Dalinar. Dalinar goes back, tells Sadeas that he's taking the bridgeman. Sadeas refuses, and apparently in the law it would essentially be theft from one Bright Lord stealing from the other, and so Sadeas would have legal ground to attack or whatever. Dalinar summons his Shardblade, and I'm thinking they're going to fight. I'm getting all excited for that, but what happened next shocked me even more. He gives it to Sadeas so that he can have the bridgeman, and of course Sadeas takes it because he's greedy and manipulative. But yeah, so of course he takes it, and then Kaladin is shocked. He says, why did you do that? And Dalinar says, well, what is the life of a man worth? Kaladin thinks back to his father and says, a life is priceless. And Dalinar says, you saved all these priceless lives today. A Shardblade is also considered priceless, and I only had to give up one Shardblade for all the lives that you saved. So there's that. There's also the fact that Dalinar would presumably be dead if it weren't for Kaladin in the first place. But on that note, I was thinking, Dalinar, for all intents and purposes, should have still died. The Parshendi Shardbearer still beat him in battle and had the opportunity to kill him, but instead he was looking at him and taking his time with actually finally killing him, and said something along the lines of, I finally found you. And that's still an unanswered question. I'm not sure what's going on there. But the Parshendi, I don't believe, are as unintelligent as the Alethi make them out to be. I think the Parshendi they're a really nuanced character, and I think that they understand things on a level and in a way that the Alethi do not. And I think that speaks to, the real world between different countries and groups of people. Sometimes one group looks down upon another, but it's not that, people have different strengths. They have different ways of looking at things. We can all learn from each other. So I think that that's a bit of what's going on here in the book. So what else do we have? We also have Navani and Dalinar and their relationship blooming. And I thought that something was very interesting that Navani said to Dalinar. She said that, your guilt is overly self-indulgent, which spoke to Brandon Sanderson's understanding of psychology. It was very nuanced. And this idea that someone could be self-indulgent through guilt is interesting. I think that in layman terms, guilt and shame are used almost interchangeably in purely a psychological sense. As far as the literature is concerned, guilt is more of an outward-facing emotion within the social stratosphere that people exist in, because we're social creatures. Guilt is an emotion that is focused on the perception of others on what you've done wrong and trying to repair those relationships so that you're not ostracized in society. Whereas shame is more of an inward-facing emotion where you take what you've done wrong and you integrate it into yourself. You feel bad about yourself, who you are as a person. It's more maladaptive as compared to guilt. But some people are so wrapped up in only allowing themselves to focus on the needs and wants and desires of others that they don't allow time for self-care, for self-reflection, to take care of the self and consider one's own needs and desires. And so their mind, in a way, subconsciously, at times comes up with a strategy to still have some time where you have inward-facing focus. And you focus on the self, but it's often through shame. And so it's this really dark and maladaptive way of finally taking some time to focus on the self, but in order to try to avoid this feeling that you're being self-indulgent, it's done through the lens of shame, where you're taking that time to focus on yourself, but you're beating yourself up in the process. And so people can get caught in cycles like that, and it's worth recognizing so that you can pull out of that and realize that, yes, you care about other people and you want the best for others, but in order to be the best version of yourself for others, you have to take care of yourself first. And so it's not shameful to take some time to focus on the self and your needs and what you need, what you believe in, which in Dalinar's case is a lot of what he's so concerned with. He's concerned with, being this model character who upholds the codes and the old ways. And he's so concerned with how others perceive him and all these things. But really, in the end, whenever he goes to meet his death and he thinks he's about to die, he realizes that all these concerns with the perception of his self from others' perspectives doesn't really matter in the end. He's happy with who he has become and the way that he's chosen to live his life, which I think is a strong lesson there. So this part of the book was just so enjoyable to read. I'm going to finish the rest of the book here right after I finish this video. Trying to think if I covered everything. We talked about Kaladin, his arc converging finally with Adolin and Dalinar. I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm excited to see him in a different context besides just being a bridgeman. I've been waiting for that. We talked about some of the psychological themes. We talked about the difference between guilt and shame in a purely psychological context. So I think that when Navani says, you're overly indulgent with your guilt, I think she is really talking about his shame that he's using as a method to finally take some time to focus on himself. And then, of course, we've got the scene where Dalinar confronts the king. I think that Dalinar has thought this through and understands that even though he was so rough with the king, and the king probably has some injury to his ego after that he can still trust the king to not betray him, because, Dalinar is his late father's brother, so he's the king's uncle. He's courting his mother. He obviously doesn't want his only living parent to be, dismayed by losing someone she loves. And the king is so paranoid that someone is out to get him that now he fully understands that Dalinar is someone he can trust. And beyond that, he realizes now that his guards and those who are sworn to protect him are really Dalinar's men, and are loyal to Dalinar. So I think Dalinar understands that the king is not going to betray him in this moment. And so we'll see. It depends on how Game of Thrones this book really is, but there's already been several points in the story where I've been thrown off and surprised. So it makes the book all that much more enjoyable to read. So that's part 4. Awesome story. If you have any thoughts on what I've said here or your favorite parts from part 4, let me know, and I'll see you after I finish the book. See you in the next video. Thanks.